Hi, everybody.
Hey, Paul.
Hi.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the second in our series of PROI podcasts. Um, the last time out, we looked at an interesting and I think underreported aspect of agency management, bringing together three entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs from different continents to discuss the challenges they'd faced and the difference that gender made in their leadership style. This time out, we're going to be looking not at entrepreneurs per se, but as second and in one case, at least third generation CEOs of independent firms. Um, this topic interested me because I think it's long been the norm for agencies when their founders reach a certain age or a certain stage of their career to look around for potential buyers and to sort of there's almost a natural hierarchy out there, I think, which starts with the big PR holding companies like WPP and Omnicom and Interpublic, and then works its way down. Nowadays, obviously, you have private equity in there. You have some smaller sort of roll-up oriented independent groups. And you have a bunch of PR agencies that are going around buying other PR agencies. And so there's no shortage of options for agency founders when they choose to move on. And yet, the agencies represented here today have all chosen a slightly different route, remaining independent, passing on ownership from one generation to another. And so we're going to explore why agencies make that choice. We're going to explore what the implications are, both for agency founders and for the next generation of management. We're going to discuss what the opportunities are that are created by this. And I think we should have a lively discussion. Let's start, if we can, by just going around the screen and introducing ourselves and maybe just giving a brief explanation of how you got to be the manager, part owner of, or in some cases, full owner of the operation that you're leading today, Debbie.
Yep. Hi. So I'm Debbie Penton. I'm the managing director of Wildfire. We're a technology PR agency in London. I am a 65% shareholder of Wildfire now. That came about because we've been through many lives, but originally the original founder of Wildfire actually gave me 49% of the business when it was tiny, and I helped build it to an agency that then merged with another one, which then made my shareholding down to 20%. And then 3 years ago, we did an MBO with another of the founders of the business we merged with. Sorry, sounds complicated. And which leaves me where I am today.
Great. Tobias.
Yes, hello. I'm Tobias Bieler from Klenket Horsch in Germany. I'm one of the owners and the chief financial officer of our firm. And so when I entered our firm almost 18 years ago, I started as a junior consultant in our operations back then only in Frankfurt. And I made the full journey from, starting as a junior consultant to today being the largest shareholder of our company. And today we have 70 people in Germany in our 4 offices in Frankfurt, Munich, Hamburg, and Berlin. And certainly it will be very interesting probably to talk today about the different opportunities along the journey so far, and also as you introduced, Paul, the different advantages and also the reasons why we personally or also the colleagues we continued on our journey within our company now and didn't take the different opportunities on sideways, right? Following other chances.
And Luke.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Paul. Good to be with you once again. And Luke Lambert, CEO of GNS Business Communications, and I'm the third generation CEO of GNS that Paul mentioned. And that's because we've been in existence at GNS since we were formed in 1971, so it's 52 years of this. And just a little history: our firm was founded by two gentlemen who left Burson Marsteller, formed GNS in 1971, and the reason succession planning started so early is because one of the owners came to the other, and Dick Gibbs was forced to say I'm gonna retire, and he was fairly young, I think in his early 40s, to go do something different. And Mr. Gibbs decided, I've got this incredible talent here at the agency, and now it's all on me. And he turned to his advisor, the person who had incorporated our agency, happened to be our attorney, and they drafted a shareholder agreement. At that moment, that was over 25 years ago. They started a succession plan, and they extended ownership on to a group of rising executives at the time. And I think it, in many cases, kind of made us a unicorn for independent agencies in the industry. But now today, fast forward, we have nine owners, which I'm one of.
That's really interesting, Luke, and sort of a good starting point for the first thing that I wanted to talk about, which is why entrepreneurs choose what I think is still the path less traveled, right? The perception when I talk to agency founders is still that if you want to maximize the sort of cash benefit of getting out of an agency, you find a buyer. And usually that means you find a third-party buyer with deep pockets and a really specific need for the kind of agency that you've built. And then you try to negotiate the highest price possible. And I think there's always this perception that if you pass it on to the next generation, maybe you get to keep a little bit more of the legacy and the culture that you built up, but you probably end up leaving money on the table. So I guess my first question is, why do entrepreneurs choose this continued independence over the potential of a giant cash payout? And Luke, you were talking about how the decision came about at GNS. So why don't you tell me, as far as you know it, sort of what the thought process was there?
Yeah. So thanks, Paul. So like I said earlier, it was a series of events with our firm. Our co-founder Dick Gibbs, who I mentioned, his over 25 years ago, his partner, came to him, and they were both, I think, don't quote me on it, I think about 40, in their early 40s, and his partner decided to retire and go do something different. And Dick looked around and saw this, talent that he had across the agency, and wanted to engage that talent. He also, I think this is a critical point, had a wonderful advisor at his side, our attorney, who helped start our firm, incorporate our firm, and quickly they decided, let's put a shareholders agreement together, and let's start, quote unquote, selling this agency for the future, to a select number of folks in that next gen. And that's exactly what they did. And part of that is an annual, what is now an annual valuation. That's a best practice that started over 25 years ago, and we're still doing it on an annual basis today. And I think when you do that and you put a dollar value to your agency and watch what happens, the decisions you make when the value goes up and when it goes down, it really gives people at that next level kind of an ownership mentality. And I think that's critical. But, I don't think, going back to, I don't think there's one answer today. You mentioned the people you talk to and how dynamic this market is, the M&A market in our industry. I don't think it's always the same. And we did an acquisition in 2018 of Cooper Katz and Ralph Katz's firm at the time. And Ralph, one of the finest gentlemen, in my opinion, to serve our profession. It was time for a variety of reasons that I won't get into, that for him to sell his agency to GNS and not to his employees, although that could have been an option. But we both made the best of it. And what made that unique is that we made our first ever acquisition, and we brought in who was their current CEO at the time as an equity partner in GNS. So I think every situation is really different, and sometimes even the holding company option. Even the holding company option, private equity, we're seeing that more and more. That can be a good option too for firms. So I think it depends on the situation.
Tobias, sort of the same question for you, but maybe can since you're a CFO and have therefore, I assume, a greater understanding of these things than we mere mortals, talk a little bit about the mechanics of selling to existing employees and how that worked in your case, whether it was out of overtime, out of profits, or whether you had to put large amounts of your own cash in to make the acquisition. How did that work in your case?
Well, first of all, I think it's also important to understand a little bit about the structure, how our partnership was set up. It's a little bit similar to what Luke just explained. So our founders, which are also in our company name, Stefan Horsch and Volker Klenk, they have been in the leadership of integrated networks, leading the German operations. So when they set up their own company 20 years ago, from the very first day, they envisioned already the handover to the next generation. It's in our DNA. It's written down. It has massive effect on our values and everything. It's similar to what Luke just said. Following to the plan now, to your question, Paul. What we did, it was rather a step-by-step approach. So handing over of responsibility, getting along with handing over of shares. The shares in our case, people stepping up, employees stepping up to become co-owners of the company. They had to buy the stock. They had to pay cash, so it's an equity partnership. Obviously, there were arrangements between the founding partners and younger partners in terms of financing these packages. But it's still that. So also today, it's not linked to money that comes from the operation, linked to profits. If you want to improve to increase your shares. But you pay cash, right? That's our model. But importantly, stepping up a bit, always a bit, and that over the time, I think in our case was also important because it gave you the opportunity, because it's a shift, right? The one, as I said, I started as an employee, as a junior consultant in the company, and stepping up. And it's important that you also have the time to develop the skills, not only becoming an even better advisor or consultant, but getting the capabilities also in terms of managing a company, entrepreneurial skills. So I think acquiring more and more shares over time and shift of responsibility, that worked very well in our case over the past 20 years.
Great. Debbie, feel free to add your own experience to the answers that we've already gotten from Tobias and Luke there. But I'm also interested from your perspective on whether this route has different implications for both employees and for clients, whether it's a more comfortable transition for employees and clients, whether it offers them a continuity that isn't necessarily there with a traditional acquisition. What's your experience been?
Yeah, I think I've been part of companies who've been taken over by bigger companies. I've had discussions about sales. We've looked at all of the options. Different things have happened over the years. I think that one of the things is control, and with that also allows you to be more open and take people on a journey. Typically with an acquisition or a sale, or, you know, everyone's very hush-hush about it. It can kind of, everyone's going into locked rooms and sort of working out the details, and it's very distracting for everyone and all involved. The employees aren't really sure what's going on. You can't really tell them in case it doesn't happen. It's all so uncertain. I think the benefit of kind of selling back to your business or into the employees is that you can communicate the benefits from the outset. You can bring people along. You have control over the timing, the valuation, the future. You can collaborate with people, and that does absolutely give them the kind of certainty and stability. And you can think about everybody's ambitions in that process. You can talk to the team and say, right, you know, what do we want to get from this? Even the ones who aren't particularly, you know, there are people maybe who haven't got ownership, then in a sales situation wouldn't necessarily be involved in those discussions, but you can kind of make a plan for them in the future, and have that kind of aspect of legacy that people can come on board with. So I think it's probably, you know, can be a lot more stable. And if you like to be able to plan and control things, then you know, that route is, you know, one to consider strongly, I think.
I'm sort of intrigued by whether you, inheriting a firm like this, would consider yourself to be, or yourselves to be, entrepreneurs. And I come to this question because when we started our global event in Miami 10 or 15 years ago, we started it with something called the Independent PR Firms Forum, because I wanted all independent PR firms to feel welcome, and I wanted it to be inclusive. And I actually got pushback from, I mean, the name was unwieldy, but I got pushback from people in second generation firms, saying, you know, you can call it the Entrepreneurs Forum. We feel just as entrepreneurial as the people who founded our firm. And I'm sort of interested whether you as individuals feel like you have that kind of entrepreneurial DNA and you are fulfilling your entrepreneurial ambitions, as opposed to being, I don't know, second generation caretaker managers or whatever that sounds like a slightly dismissive term, but whatever the term is for the next generation. I mean, do you consider yourself to be an entrepreneur, Luke? And would you have contemplated going out on your own if this opportunity hadn't come along?
Yeah, you know, first off, the answer to your first question is absolutely. I think if you're an owner in an independent firm, you have to take an entrepreneurial mindset. One of the first things that I did, and it's interesting, we just had a principal meeting early this morning where we talked about our values. And one of the values that I built on a foundation of really, really strong values. So I was very fortunate. But one of the first values that I put in place was confident risk taking. And I think it's so important to be a risk taker, a confident risk taker. And that was my first order of business, really, was to instill that value. It's so important because if you're not taking risks, then you're not being entrepreneurial. You run the risk of becoming stale, and you're afraid as an agency to take on new ideas, bring new ideas to the table, and you're afraid to fail. And think about what happened in the past 10 years in our profession. If we hadn't done that, well, we wouldn't have a creative team that's 25 people strong and a digital team just as large. And last year we launched a media team. So if you don't have that entrepreneurial spirit or don't feel that you're an entrepreneur as a business owner, then I think you're missing something.
Well, what about you, Debbie? Because I've got to admit, the first time we met, I just assumed you were a founder. You sort of, you present as a founder. If that's not, I mean that as a compliment. I hope you understand it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I, certainly feel the entrepreneurial spirit, but I don't call myself an entrepreneur. Someone wrote a blog for me this week and it started as an entrepreneur. I was like, well, you can take that out. One, I just don't think it, I don't know. It's I don't believe in sort of starting things with those labels. It feels like, you know, well, what does that even mean? But, you know, everything that Luke said, I agreed with. I was like, yeah, sure, I've got all of those things, but I didn't start the agency. I wouldn't have started an agency. I think sometimes having that sort of, there's a founder's mentality, right, that comes with, I started this, I bootstrapped, I, you know, sold my house, I put it on credit cards. And with that often can lead those people to be a bit more, you know, to want to maximize the value financially that they get out of the business at the other end. And I've seen a lot of that where you've got these founders who are quite greedy and don't necessarily share that with their people who are running the business, and they lose really good people because they haven't got a broader mindset on that. And perhaps as second generation leaders, we've been in a fortunate position where we've grown through the ranks, or someone has shared their business with us. We've obviously will have sweated a lot to get there. Nothing happens without a lot of hard work. But I think with that mentality, you know, I certainly feel that I don't want to maximize value out of the business and kill everyone in the process, and then I swan off into the sunset and leave them with some random owner who might change the business beyond their recognition. It feels like you want to reward the people around you a whole lot more because, you know, you feel fortunate to be in the position that you're in.
The other thing that happens, and it's part of that, I guess, is that nearly every second generation firm that I know has a broader base of employee owners than the firm started with. So if the firm was started by one or two people, which is the norm, that base of ownership gets better. That's the case with you, right, Tobias? And
that's the case. So we're now 8 owners, and it started off with 2. So yes, that's the case with us. And I also, so I agree, absolutely. I would say the same thing like Luke and Debbie described. So I absolutely feel this entrepreneurial spirit strongly. But I was not a founder, and I certainly was not feeling like an entrepreneur when I started my job as a junior consultant at the company where today I have the largest share. You know, that's what I think on the journey from becoming an employee to an owner of a business, an independent company, I think it is important to get as much entrepreneurial inspiration and acquire knowledge as much as you can. And it's sometimes difficult in the industry. I mean, certainly, you know, within the PRI Worldwide Network, this is a great opportunity for us because we are all entrepreneurs. I call myself an entrepreneur, Debbie, but I think we have the same, but I agree also to what you just said. But we are all business owners, and we can have a very open discussion on important topics, have exchange and knowledge and experience sharing, and that is important. But the other thing is sometimes I believe it's helpful to get out of the industry even. So, for example, me and I know also other partners within the PRI network, for example, are involved in, you know, entrepreneurial networks, organizations outside our industry, because it's so important to get, you know, to get more knowledge and build new networks on the entrepreneurial level, not within the industry, because that's, I think, another level. Yeah.
So that leads me into another question, which is sort of how well prepared you felt when you took over as a business owner. You know, it's long been a point of interest for me that as an industry, whether we're talking about mid-sized firms or the big global behemoths, we tended to take people who are great PR practitioners and promote them up the ladder until they become they're in charge of a P&L. And we assume that just because they were great PR people, they were also going to be great P&L managers. And we know, I think, from experience, that's not the case. So how well prepared did you, I'm going to start with you, Luke, how well prepared did you feel for that transition from PR guy to CEO, or in your case, CEO, from counselor to owner? And were you helped to prepare for that, or was it just sort of basically, here's the deep end, let's see how you do?
Yeah, no, in my case, I was helped tremendously. And by the way, joined the agency, had a little bit of agency experience, had more corporate experience, and then consulting experience, an advisory and CPA firm. So I had a little bit of different background, and ironically joined GNS in 1996 as in a business development capacity, the first one joining in that capacity. And had some success early on, and things snowballed from there. But I think the preparation for becoming an owner, a couple things I remember in particular that I think were really helpful as I, advanced at GNS and it wasn't just me, there were several of us who were looked at, I think, as high potential performers. We were invited, as I like to use, next gen leaders, to join ownership meetings, even their annual meetings. So, we certainly didn't attend every portion of it, but we had a seat at the table to really partake in really important discussions about growth, about the direction of the agency, and we really felt our voice was valued. That is such important on-the-job training. I can't stress it enough. Something we're working on a lot this year ourselves. And I mentioned the advisor that started the agency. I just have this fond memory of the role he played because he attended all of our meetings. The conversations I had with him prior to becoming an owner to talk about the history of the firm's ownership, the nuts and bolts. We're an S Corp, by the way. So the nuts and bolts of how an S Corp is set up, what it means, what investing looks like, but also like what are the risks and what are the rewards. And so Paul, sorry, long answer to say, I felt very prepared.
What about you, Debbie?
I guess I'd run Wildfire as a smaller business and have been the managing director and grown it from a couple of people to, maybe it was 12 people, I think, when we merged. When we merged, we suddenly had 6 shareholders, which I was one, and I wasn't MD anymore. So I would say I was chomping at the bit for years to get a hold of the business, itching for the founder to kind of move on and let me run things. And so it was,
I felt that way at every single company I worked for from age 17. So I get that 100%.
And so I obviously wasn't like 100% ready to do everything. But, I guess the benefit was that we're talking, Wildfire's 30 people. We were talking about a smaller business and not running a kind of multi-territory sort of organization. I see everyone want to come into the office. So I think, so it wasn't, quite as big a challenge and a massive board and all of those sorts of things. But and the rest you learn as you go. So it's, that was my approach.
What about you, Tobias? Was there anything that you wish you'd known before you got the ownership position? Was there anything that took you by surprise about being an owner?
Not really. So first of all, not really, because I think there's a lot of experience. You just have to make yourself, right? Nobody can tell you. You have to do it by your own. I truly believe this step-by-step approach I was followed, that helped me a lot. So I felt well prepared from our founding partners in that term, that the responsibility switch was step by step. Still, I would totally agree. Some of the steps felt like jumping into ice cold water still, right? So there were huge steps also. There was I had a very big motivation and passion for the move when I was a director. I was trusted to open up our first office out of Frankfurt, right? So opened our Munich office. Before we were operating 10 years in Frankfurt, and it was a second office in Germany. And actually that trust from the founders, but also the responsibility and also the skills I was able to acquire, you know, by opening, managing, growing an office within our organization. That in consequence was the first step to, you know, to my position I have today, because leading now the finance for all organization, all offices, that was just possible because I made that way. And actually also getting back to a question right from the beginning, why did I choose to stay within our company? There are times where probably it feels like, you know, if I need something new, I need change, I need some more inspiration, also probably some, you know, something I can do on my own. That was the moment, right? I was trusted to open up our operation in Munich, and that was the moment where I was sure, you know, for the next years, I have a really challenging, great opportunity to grow personally as an entrepreneur, get into new responsibilities. So yes, that's I felt prepared on the one hand, yes, step by step, and learning more from the founders, obviously learned a lot. On the other hand, you have to make a lot of the experiences on your own. That's my experience. Yeah.
Such a great point. And by the way, as prepared as I felt, Tobias and Debbie, you just made this point. I couldn't agree more about, you know, making the investment and what it means, and being guided through the process. I mean, beyond the job training is incredible. You forget a lot of what you learn going through that. It's not until you experience it. The business challenges, they're good years, and there are years that you're not as fond of. You have to go through those business cycles, and through those, you learn just as much through the bad years as the good years. So there's a lot of on-the-job experience and training as well.
But it's a very, I mean, it's a very multi-dimensional role, right? As owner, you're responsible for the numbers, but you're also responsible for the people and, you know, their destiny and well-being. That there have been dimensions added to the job in recent years that maybe we didn't have to think about 10 years ago, the mental health of our employees, and, you know, how they're balancing work and life. I mean, it seems to me that all CEOs are likely to be good at one or two of the things that they're expected to do, and mediocre at best at 3 or 4 of them. But maybe that's just me and I'm projecting it onto everybody else.
How rude, Paul.
Sorry.
Mediocre.
Yeah, and interestingly, also adding to what also Luke just said before, I think when I said stepping up and, you know, getting more and more involved also in the company, adding up shares, I think there's still the moment when there is this moment of shift from a generation to another, when you have the majority. And even though you're working for a long time together and you have this, you know, step-by-step approach, getting more responsibility, there is this point and it feels different. It changes massively the way how you operate, because then you have both hands on the steering wheel, right? It's like you said, all is in your hand. It's your responsibility. There's the partnership, but the majority is also putting a lot of responsibility on your side. So I think that's sure. Also important.
And we're not doing it all, are we? We've all got a team around us who, you know, someone who's better at the numbers or better at that other thing. So, you know, fortunately, we don't have to do it all.
Yeah.
Team effort.
Yeah. I know. I mean, from my experience, I always tell people the best advice I ever got was hire people smarter than you are. Which I found alarmingly easy. But now there are people doing every job in my company who are way better at it than I was when I was trying to do them all. I think everybody who starts a company ends up in that place. What about what happens next? I don't want to ask any of you to reveal secret strategies for the future, but do you feel any kind of obligation to hand over to a next generation of sort of independent ownership, or, you know, if you're approached by somebody with deep pockets, would you be happy to sell and have G&S become part of, you know, whichever big behemoth is out there today making acquisitions?
Great. That's a great question. I'm just going to be really honest with you. I think first off, in terms of passing the torch, I don't want to say the day I took the job, I started thinking about it, but I I talk openly about succession with our team, and I have for years. Not to work myself out of a job by any means, but I think the process has to start early. It has to be part of almost every major business decision you make, like an acquisition. You need to think about succession. What are you acquiring? Things like that. But I also think, you know, over the course of our careers, we watch succession happen in different phases of our career, but also different positions that we've been in. And you've seen good succession and you've seen bad. And I think good succession takes time, right? And I think it has to really, really start early. So yeah, I'm planning for that every day. Number one. Number two, I used to have a mentality years ago that we used to use the word fiercely independent, or I think it was even stronger than that. But we don't say that. How can you say that today in this environment when you are approached or when you see the kind of moves that agencies are making that are right for them at that moment? And so I think you never say never, but I think you do have to plan, especially in our case, 52 years to plan to pass on internally right. to the next. In our case, it'll be the fourth generation, right?
Debbie, any thoughts on that? Do you keep do you have sort of a mental Rolodex or even something more formal that says these are the people that I have in my company who one day are going to be the right people?
Oh, I think we've definitely got the right people who'll take over. And I think that it's really important that I move out of the way and let those people take over. I don't want to be, we have a joke and I'm sorry, you just let me know when it's time for me to pop off to the glue factory, because, I don't want to stay in anyone's way. And equally, I know that no one would want me to leave too soon either. So I think it's, trying to get that balance right so that you don't stop anyone's ambition or get in the way of their kind of development and progress because of your own, what you want to do. But then, there's lots of things that I want to do. I'm doing a master's degree in behavioral science. I've got things that I'm really interested in that I can't, that I'm not exploring in the kind of career I've got right now. So I want to have the opportunity to do those things. I don't want to run a PR agency for the rest of my life, but but other people want that opportunity too. So I think it's important to to plan and bring everybody with you.
Right. And of course, that kind of succession planning mindset is important, whatever you intend to do, right? I mean, more and more we hear that even the traditional acquirers, whether that's a holding company or a private equity company or whatever, want to know more about the next generation of management than they maybe did 4 or 5 years ago. And so presumably, Tobias, you guys are always thinking about sort of how strong the bench is, how much depth you have, how many people you have who one day could step up and take on a broader role.
So we also have already a few candidates on the list, and this is already in progress. But I would absolutely agree. So I think it's not an option. I would never say today, definitely this is the one way to follow. We will definitely have, sell our shares all to employee. You have to be, you need to have the options, I think. And you also have to prepare your company to follow it both ways, because otherwise also you're not maximizing the value for your owners, right? And to develop the company in a healthy way, financially, and also in terms of organization. So I think this is very important, and probably also something I see, at least here in Germany, that some agencies in the past decades missed to do. That these were agencies run by individuals. They were not able to build up a strong second generation leadership. And they were also not able to set up a way to, to either have a good external sale to network or something, because they were not following this road. And I think this is really important, and we put lots of efforts in this also. Yeah.
Right. No, I think we can probably all think of agencies in our respective markets that were absolute leaders 10, 20, 30 years ago that vanished because there wasn't a succession plan, because nobody knew who was going to come next. I'm interested, as we talk about sort of the next generation. I'm not trying to push anybody up and out, obviously, but is there a difference between saying, okay, this person is a star employee, and saying this person is a future leader, owner of the firm? And what do you do for those people who are superstars when it comes to PR, but don't necessarily have the ambition or the skills or the resources to become an owner going forward? And how do you sort of manage expectations for all of those different kinds of people? Luke,
that is such a great question, and something we've spent a lot of time on for several months, the end of last year into this year, led by our newest owners, I might add, who asked me to, like, hey, step aside, let us take a look at exactly what you talk about here, Paul, because you're right. An equity model that requires personal investment and risk, first of all, you can't have an unlimited number of investors, right? So what they focused on is taking the mystique out of that and being open and honest about what investing means, the risks, the rewards, et cetera. We need to do a better job of that, and that's in the works now. But they really looked hard instead at the next gen leadership development, and made sure, as we've expanded our agency, like I said, all the disciplines, creative, digital, media, the DE&I initiatives that we're putting forth. And it's instead making sure that we develop those leaders and give them a seat at the table on a regular basis, a full seat at the table on important agency discussions and direction of the agency. And if we don't do that, and if we just leave this mystique that there's only one path, then how do we expect engagement of an ownership mindset of our leaders? And so that's really what we're focused on right now. And I think, and that includes, and I'll be quick, that includes giving a really defined path from what it means to go from a VP to an SVP. And if you wanted to take the path from an SVP to an owner, an investor, what does that path look like? And our group has just done a great job in the last several months getting that ready. So it's going to help our discussions with our future leaders.
Any thoughts, Debbie?
Yeah, I mean, we're not as big as these guys, and I think my next generation coming. I mean, what I am doing is, spending a lot of time working out what people want, and trying to create an environment where if someone wants to be head of brand or head of something more sustainable, that they are allowed to follow that path and almost write their own job description. And my job is to continue to grow the agency to allow there to be room for these people to follow their passion, as well as be really good at their job or do those different things. So that's kind of my approach. There's no real kind of scheme in place at the moment.
Okay. Tobias, anything to add before my last question?
Probably not very much. So we do a lot of this, what Luke and Debbie described, job descriptions, career path tracks, right? Experts or management tracks. And I certainly think there's a difference between a star employee and a potential new owner. And that's apart from also resources, etc. That's the mindset. And if you have the passion to do that, and that develops over time, that is why for us it's important to know person for quite some time, working together closely before we would ever approach and talk about a track to ownership or partnership in our organization. because the one thing is this common core value set. This is so important. We see it every day. And the second thing is really to also allow the person to discover on their own journey if they want to follow an entrepreneurial path, or if they want to become an expert. That's important. It needs time, right?
Right. Okay, so I'm very cognizant of the fact that we've been talking for a while. Your time is very valuable. So I'm going to wrap up with one final question, which is a little bit inside baseball, I guess, but from a PROI perspective, obviously, it's good for your organization if your individual members follow your path, right? I mean, the cost of your affiliate in Sweden or Malaysia deciding that they want to sell to Interpublic is that you then have to go out and find another partner that comes up to the standards that you're used to around the world. And so do you have any kind of formal mechanism in place as PROI to share your learnings about succession planning and second generation management so that you can encourage all the other firms around you to follow this track and not sell out to A, the competition, and B, create more work for you in the long run?
I mean, it's a huge part of all we always talk about. I think I was on a boat in Cairo back in October, picking Tobias's brains about the exact subject. So it's I think we talk about a lot of things, but I think given that most of us are owners, it's a huge part of what we're all talking about, and sharing learnings and still being in touch with the people who do sell up, move out, do different things. It's a very tight network where we're all kind of continuing to learn from each other.
Yeah. Paul, I'll just add to that. I agree with Debbie, and I take those relationships and use them outside of a formal PROI setting. I'm part of a CEO exchange that includes 2 other PROI CEOs and others who are not in PROI to talk about these kinds of issues. And just ironically, one of them, did sell, but they sold to private equity and became a platform. So there's no reason for them to not continue to be a PROI partner. Right. So, and you learn so much even from those kinds of exchanges. So, and Tobias mentioned that earlier, how active he is outside of the industry and how important that is. And then, Paul, I've never felt the need to score points with you, but you've given some really great forums on this. I think the most beneficial part from my standpoint of Provoke every year is what used to be Independent, now the Entrepreneurs Forum, and to be able to participate in those kinds of discussions there, with really great advisors like DZ that you put forth, has been really, really helpful to us too.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. What a fun discussion. Congratulations on keeping the independent spirit alive. I still maintain that mid-size independents are driving growth and innovation. They are more nimble than publicly traded companies, and more multi-stakeholder focused. They're better for employees, I think, probably better for clients. I say that quite openly in the boardrooms of much bigger agencies, so I'm not just currying favor. And it's great to get a little bit of sort of inside skinny on how you've accomplished it and what the priorities are. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
All right, cool. Thanks, Kim. Are you still